was made from an exact copy of an original day dress in the Hermitage clothing collection in New Jersey. This dress is made of black velveteen with Venice lace trim. It wasn't unusual for white trim and accessories to be added to morning dresses of the era, as can be seen in the fashion plates of the time. In mourning of this time, the death of a child would be symbolized with white trim, symbolizing the purity and innocence of youth. Notice the large gigot sleeves, typical of the first half of the decade. The dresses were typically no more than ankle length. Waist was a little higher than the natural waistline. Often a self-fabric belt was worn with a decorative buckle. Bonnets of the time were large, framing and obscuring the face, so one would wonder what lovely being was hiding inside. A veil might be added to indicate modesty and hide tears or a sad mood. This bonnet is made from a prefabricated frame covered with matching velveteen from the dress and a purple velvet leather. Thank you, Gina. The period of the 1840s was known as the Gothic era. Wearing it in black and ivory taffeta for the second year of mourning, Pamela brings that to life. Shoulders became narrow and sloping, waist became low and pointed, and sleeve detail migrated from the elbow to the wrists, forming a triangle from the shoulder to the waist of day dresses. Skirts evolved from a conical shape to a bell shape, aided by a new method of attaching the skirts to the bodice, using organ or cartridge pleats, which caused the skirt to spring out from the waist. The pleats are attached in a somewhat unique way that we're not familiar with in modern sewing, so that you can get a great deal of fabric into a very small space, and it also helps to accentuate the bell shape of the skirt. Full skirts were achieved mainly at this point through layers of petticoats. Bonnets for streetwear were smaller than in the previous decade, less heavily decorated. Married women wore their caps under their bonnets. Hairstyles were sleek on the sides with drooping ringlets of hair, sometimes called spaniel curls. With the narrow sloping shoulder line of the 1840s, the shawl returned to fashion where it would remain throughout the 1860s. It was now generally square and folded on the diagonal. Thank you, Pam. We move 10 years into the future to 1850 in the gown worn by Mary and see that the waistline is now back at the waist. Her bell-shaped skirt is very full, held up with multiple layers of flounced or corded petticoats. The crinoline or hoop skirt wouldn't arrive until closer to 1860. Her bodice, trimmed with self-fabric pleats, has wide pagoda sleeves with removable undersleeves. Remember, we saw those on Madame Carlotta's gown as well. A gray chemisette, similar to a dicky, is worn under the V-shaped neckline. Her gown was made using a simplicity pattern. Her straw bonnet is covered in gray moleskin fabric with pleated black fabric trimming the edges and a vintage lace veil hanging behind. Thank you, Mary. In the mid-1860s, many women in the U.S. would have lost loved ones due to the Civil War, and also Queen Victoria lost her beloved consort, Prince Albert, in 1861. This decade became the pinnacle of mourning, and strict mourning etiquette began. An entire industry started up specializing in mourning clothing. Many of those who couldn't afford the new wardrobe, the current clothing was thrown into a vat of black dye. Curtains were drawn, clocks were stopped at the time of death. Mirrors were covered because of the lingering superstition that the spirit of the deceased could become trapped in the reflective glass. Mourning jewelry also began its height of popularity during this time. Dull black materials such as jet, made of fossilized wood, gutta percha, an inexpensive fake jet, vulcanite, which is a hard rubber, and bog oak,